Hi, I'm Peter Anthony Holder.
And I'm Andrew Fazekas. Welcome to Astronomers Without Borders special Lunar Eclipse webcast. We're really excited here because this is a really special event that it crosses so many borders around the world.
And even though we're on around the world, we should mention that we're coming to you live from Montreal, Canada.
That's right. Seems to be the snow capital of the world today. We're completely socked in here, wishing we could actually see some of this eclipse, but we've got online views for you from around the world, really neat live feeds coming in from different places. And that's what really makes this exciting and brings us all together.
And Andrew, we should let them know right off the bat, because we plan to be here for 2 hours. Let them know some of the things that we're going to be talking about and some of the people we will be talking about through the course of this show.
Oh, that's right. We've got some great lineup of guests for us today. We've got historians, educators, astronomers, getting us a feel of what an eclipse is, talking to us about the science, the cultural aspects, and we even have a former NASA astronaut joining us, telling us his perspective from way up there.
And we're also going to hopefully hear from you, the general population, who's watching this, wherever you may be around the world, whether you're having a viewing party or whether you're just at home looking at out the window or in your backyard. We'd like to know what you're seeing and if you're experiencing this lunar eclipse like we hope to experience it, at least through the various places we're going to be in contact with. Like Andrew just said, we're not going to see it here where we are in Montreal, because right now we are in a snowstorm.
That's right. We're buried in snow around here in Montreal.
Hopefully it's a lot better looking where you are.
Exactly. And we've got already, I believe, one feed coming in, a live feed of the full moon. We can see the feed is being adjusted there. Right now, they're lining up. Now, the eclipse officially started at 10:34 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's really when the first little bite of Earth's shadow can be visibly seen easily by sky watchers everywhere. So if you've got keen eyesight, we're talking about the past 5 minutes, there's been a little bit of an inclination of some of that shadow creeping across the disk of the moon. But there's actually a lot of really interesting science behind the moon, really interesting stuff that our partners at National Geographic have put together. There's a really interesting video. If we can run that Eclipse Primer 101 video, that really describes really what we can see in terms of an eclipse. Let's see if we can run that. All right, so we're waiting.
While we're waiting to run that, I have a question for you, Andrew, because, you know, this is going to go on for several hours. And I'm just curious to know, people who might be not so familiar with this whole concept, when we talk about lunar eclipses, they are longer in duration than when we talk about solar eclipses.
That's right, and especially when we're talking about totality.
Yes.
The idea of the maximum part of the eclipse is really what's so impressive. Here's a really neat little video that's showing what kind of you will get to see over the course of many hours as the moon progresses across the sky. This is on, I think, on the National Mall, the Smithsonian Mall in Washington, D.C. And this is from a previous eclipse a few years back, showing how dark red it appears. And the entire eclipse lasts for 3.5 hours. That includes the partial phase of the eclipse. But the most intense part, the maximum, which we call totality, lasts for about an hour. Where when we're talking about solar eclipses, remember that's when the moon covers the sun. That lasts for a precious only 2 minutes. And you have a corridor of an area, of a geographical area that's maybe about 100 kilometers across, that you have to be in to see that 2 minutes of totality where the sun darkens. So when it comes to eclipses, the lunar eclipse is really widely available to everyone across large entire hemispheres, actually. So it really is so much easier to see. And I think anyone with clear skies or partly clear skies, you guys will be able to see some amazing things as the Earth's shadow crosses across the moon.
Unlike us folks here who are, as we say, in a snowstorm. Now, you mentioned in the video we just saw a few moments ago that that was from a couple of years ago. So how frequent is this phenomenon?
Well, Lunar eclipses on average happen about every 6 months, and they're usually followed 2 weeks 2 weeks later by a solar eclipse. So they're usually paired together. However, lunar eclipses are visible over an entire hemisphere. So in this case, today, the entire Western Hemisphere can see it. Really, the best ringside seats are for North America, Central America, and South America that get to see the entire 3.5-hour event, the partial phases and totality, while folks in Western Europe and Africa get to see the partial phases in the early morning. So on Monday, that's where whoever's watching in those regions of Western Europe and Africa are getting to see just before dawn part of the eclipse.
Okay, you've given us a pretty good idea of what it is we'll be seeing through the course of the evening, at least the evening here. But as we mentioned earlier, there is a video. It is called Lunar Eclipse 101 from National Geographic, and I understand that's ready to roll now, so let's take a look. Is there audio?
Mm-hmm.
Every 29 and a
they
half
can see
days,
temperature drops.
or the
It's like a
length of
heat
one
map
full
of the
orbit
moon.
of the moon around
And
the
they're
Earth.
incredible heat differences. They will see them
So
from
why
the
don't we
crater
have
and
an
other things.
eclipse every month?
You know, with their thermal
The
imaging
moon's
cameras. So
orbit
it's
is
quite
tilted a
remarkable
few degrees
what
in
you would
relation
be
to the
seeing
So the
you know,
Earth,
on the
moon, and sun
if you look from
don't
the Earth
always
at the
align.
moon.
When the
And
Earth
so because
does
the moon has
eclipse
no
the
atmosphere, so
sun, it casts
you go
two
through
types of
incredible
shadows
drops
on
in
the moon.
temperature.
A larger shadow, known
quite
as the
exciting.
penumbra.
Okay.
All right. So again, I think it should be important, we should say we'd like to hear from our viewers, our audience. We'd like to know what you're seeing where you are. What are the weather conditions of where you are? Are you snowed in like we are here? Or maybe you've passed the snowstorm and you've got clear skies wherever you are, or partly clear skies. Because that's one thing, you don't need to have perfectly clear skies to actually see this event. Even if it's partly or clear or perhaps hazy skies, you'll be able to see that shadow creeping across the moon. So we'd love to hear from you. You can share it on our YouTube. There's a chat right beside our YouTube video. You can put in questions. You can put in comments there. And also in the comment section below our YouTube video, you'll be able to enter your questions there. And if you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag AWB Lunar Eclipse. That's hashtag AWB Lunar Eclipse. Share your photos and videos with us there as well.
And as you mentioned, you know, we're having a snowstorm here, but there are some places that are having more clearer skies than we're having, for instance. I understand that there's some situation with California where they're having partially cloudy skies as well. But Vancouver, I understand, is very clear this evening.
That's right. So we're actually looking very forward to the idea of seeing some video from Vancouver. We'll be talking to a professional astronomer who's running a feed through itelescope.net outfit out in Vancouver. And that should be really neat to be able to see stuff. So I think, Claude, we're ready to roll the Eclipse Primer 101. This will give you an idea of what eclipses with the moon are all about. Check this out.
A lunar eclipse happens when the Earth blocks some or all of the sun's direct light from reaching the moon. This cosmic event only takes place during a full moon, which happens once every 29 and a half days, or the length of one full orbit of the moon around the Earth. So why don't we have an eclipse every month? The moon's orbit is tilted a few degrees in relation to the Earth, so the Earth, moon, and sun don't always align. When the Earth does eclipse the sun, it casts two types of shadows on the moon. A larger shadow, known as the penumbra, and a smaller, darker shadow, known as the umbra. There are three types of lunar eclipses. The first is a total lunar eclipse, when the sun, moon, and Earth are in perfect alignment and the moon falls within the Earth's umbral shadow. Total lunar eclipses are the most striking of the three types because they turn the moon a sunset red, while shorter blue wavelengths of light are scattered outward outward by the Earth's atmosphere, longer red wavelengths are refracted or bent inward toward the moon, making it appear red. The brightness of the moon's red glow depends upon how much dust and clouds are in the Earth's atmosphere. Following volcanic activity, ash can block out enough light to render the moon a darker red or even near black. A partial lunar eclipse, the second type, occurs when the Earth, Moon, and Sun don't perfectly align, so only part of the moon passes into Earth's umbra. Earth's shadow appears very dark on the side of the moon facing Earth. Last, a penumbral lunar eclipse occurs when the moon passes through Earth's penumbral shadow. The event is so subtle that most people don't even notice. The moon will appear just slightly darker than normal. Lunar eclipses occur up to 3 times a year and can be observed from the entire nighttime half of the Earth. Unlike during a solar eclipse, it's safe to look at the moon with the naked eye during a lunar eclipse. It is only because of the distances of the sun and moon from the Earth that we are able to witness total lunar eclipses. As the moon inches away from the Earth each year, one day, billions of years from now, the moon will be too far away to fall completely within Earth's umbral shadow. Until then, we can occasionally enjoy seeing our own planet's shadow cast upon the largest object in the night sky.
All right. So we're back. So that was a bit of a primer of what an observer can really expect to see in terms of an eclipse. And there's a lot of science, right, behind it. So I mean, this is something that a lot of people, when they look at an eclipse, they may not really think about, you know, what is actually going on? What is the deeper science behind it? And we've got on the line right now Astronomers Without Borders Education Director, Lindsey Bart. Can we have Lindsey come up on screen? Is she available? There we go.
Lindsey. First of all, we should also mention, we should thank National Geographic for the video we just saw.
Oh yeah, that was a great primer. Thank you.
Hi Lindsey, how are you?
Hi, great to be here.
Thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about the work you do as an AWB Education Director. What exactly are your duties?
Great. Well, I really think about helping people understand all the great things that we can see in the sky above us. So that ranges from educator professional development to working on our website, designing programs for our upcoming celebrations in the sky, and also for things like educational demos for nights like this.
Are you able to enjoy tonight's lunar eclipse, or is it cloudy where you are too?
Well, obviously I'm indoors right now, but about 2 hours ago I could see the full moon through some clouds. So I'm not real sure. As soon as we're off the air here, I plan on running outside and checking on the progress.
And for geographical purposes, what part of the continent are you on?
I'm sorry, I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago, Illinois. So you got clear skies in Chicago. That's good.
Yeah, not too far from us. Yeah, that's right.
Now tell us about, we're going to be showing a video that you just put together for us earlier today. Tell us a little bit about that before we run it.
Right. So I hope everyone will have a chance to really enjoy the eclipse tonight. But for some of us who like to think a little bit more deeply, this video demonstration is something that'll help keep our mental juices flowing. And if before we go to the video, are we able to talk about the questions?
Sure. Yeah, let's shoot. What questions do you have for our audience to think about?
All right. Is the PowerPoint available, or should I bring it up here?
Let's see if you can bring it up there.
All right.
Whoops. Oh, did we lose Lindsey?
We're here.
We seem to have lost Lindsey.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay. So here are some questions that will help us think a little bit more deeply about the eclipse. First off, here is a question that just simply asks, why do we see an eclipse of the moon? Is it because the moon goes into the Earth's shadow? Clouds go in front of the moon goes between the Earth and the sun, or the sun is between the Earth and the moon? If you want to, you can feel free to type in your answers into a chat, either on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, wherever you're enjoying our broadcast this evening. The next question is, which picture most closely resembles the total phase of the lunar eclipse? What it's going to look like? Will it look like A, B, C, or D? And finally, which picture or pictures show the shadow of the Earth on the surface of the moon? This is for those of us who really want to make some close observations.
All right, some food for thought there.
Food for thought. No. Didn't know there was going to be a test after all.
There's a test here? Are we?
Well, and as we all learn more together throughout the broadcast, we'll revisit those questions and then we can check our understanding of what's going on.
Well, let's roll the video that you prepared for us. Shall we do that?
Great, thanks.
We'll roll that now.
All right. Let's see if we can get that video up. We're still waiting.
For Astronomers Without Borders. Tonight, I'm going to explore a model that will help us to examine the differences between lunar phases and lunar eclipses. You may have noticed that when you look at the moon, sometimes you see it at night, and sometimes you see it during the day. Sometimes it looks round like a ball or a circle, and sometimes like a crescent shape. Sometimes it even looks a bit like a football. But what causes the moon to look different this way? The moon doesn't make its own light, but reflects light from the sun into our eyes so that we can see it. At any given time, half of the moon's surface is lit by the sun. It appears a bright white or gray most of the time. The moon orbits around the Earth once a month. Depending upon the position of the Earth, moon, and sun, we can see a part of the sunlit half of the moon. This is what causes lunar phases. However, about twice a year, the Earth, moon, and sun line up just right so that the moon passes into the shadow of the Earth, making a lunar eclipse visible somewhere on Earth. So, how do we know that lunar phases are caused by seeing a part of the sunlit half of the moon and not by the Earth's shadow, and that lunar eclipses are caused by the Earth's shadow? By making very careful observations and comparing what we see with our eyes to models that we can make here on Earth. A shadow is caused by an object blocking light from a source, like the sun. There are three areas to pay attention to when you really think about shadows. There is the dark side of the object, the dark area may be on the floor or ground that you might typically think of as a shadow, and then all the dark space in between. We are going to try looking at the shadows of a few objects to try and figure out their shapes. Not what they are, but their shapes only. Here we have a flashlight shining through a magazine holder. You'll notice when I put my hand in front, it makes a shadow on the front like a screen. First, I'm going to place inside a clear container that will act as a stand for my mystery object. Now I'm going to place my first mystery object. Can you guess what shape object is making the shadow? What shape is the shadow on the screen? The shadow on the screen is a circle. Well, if you guessed a ball, you were right. Is there any way that this ball could make a shadow that is straight like a ruler? Now I'm going to place another object in front of the flashlight.
Started.
What shaped object is making this shadow? Another ball? A disc like a coin? How could we find out?
So just wait for a few seconds.
I'm going to try turning the object so we can get another view.
It is. And look, friends, and as you can see here,
as you can see now,
on
the shape of the shadow is very
see
different.
That the brightness of the moon is, a bit fainter because, of course,
Now, let's look at some images taken of the moon. Here is a picture of a crescent moon. Could the Earth shadow be making this shape on the moon? Could this shape we see on the moon be made just by seeing part of the lit up half of the moon? How could we find out? Let's look at another model. Here is a picture of that ball with the flashlight shining on it. Here's the lit up side, and here's the dark side. If we look at it from closer to the point of view of the flashlight, we see more of the lit up part, making the lit up shape look more like a football. And if we look at it from a point of view opposite the flashlight, we see less of the lit up part, making the lit up shape look more like a crescent. Now let's look at a picture of the first quarter moon. Could this shape have been made by the shadow of the Earth? No. This shape could not have been made by the shadow of an object that's round like a ball. So, what could we be seeing? Could we be looking at part of the lit up half of the moon? Let's look at our model picture again. When we look at the ball from this point of view and only see part of the lit up half, I think it looks just like the first quarter moon. So, you can see a moon that looks like this with a very straight line between the lit part and the dark part without involving the Earth shadow at all. Now let's look at another image. What do you think is going on here? Could the Earth shadow make this shape? Yes, this is what it looks like when the moon crosses into the Earth's shadow. Very different than what a first quarter moon looks like. This is a lunar eclipse, and this is the first quarter moon. Make sure to check your observations when you observe the lunar eclipse or first quarter moon. So let's take a look at these questions. Why do we see an eclipse of the moon? Is it A, the moon goes into Earth's shadow? B, clouds go in front of the moon? C, the moon goes in between the Earth and the sun? Or D, the sun is between the Earth and the moon? If you thought A, you were correct. Next, which picture or pictures show the shadow of the Earth on the surface of the moon? Look carefully. These are the pictures that show the shadow of the Earth on the surface of the moon.
Let's look at that now.
Very informative stuff. Thank you very much, Lindsey. And we'll be speaking to Lindsey a little later on in the program as well. Now, there we have another guest coming up, and he's got clear skies, I understand. Or maybe he doesn't have clear skies. I don't know.
We're going to have to find out, but this was a live interview. We're going to talk to him live. This is Jay Pasok that we're going to be talking live with. He is a professor of astronomy at Williams College in Massachusetts. And we'll get him on air here. Oh, there.
And I see he also has a guest with him. Who's the young lady with you, Jay?
This is my granddaughter, Lily Kaysbaum. She's been watching with her telescope, and she's been snapping pictures.
She's a little camera shy. So you say she's been snapping pictures with her telescope, so I assume you have clearer skies in Massachusetts than we have here.
Well, I'm actually in California.
Oh, you're in California.
I'm in California, which is about 10 miles northwest of Pasadena, California, near Southern California.
Uh-huh.
Well, we decided to have you on because, you know, to take a look at this, you need some great tips to learn how to take a look properly at a lunar eclipse. So who better to come to than you, Jay?
Well, thank you very much. I know the person in front of me was describing the circumstances, but I was busy photographing with Lily, so I didn't hear what she said. So just ask away.
So, well, just basic question. What are the best ways to look at a solar eclipse? What are the tips we need to know?
Well, I think you need a lawn chair outside and just sit and look up. That's all you need for lunar eclipse. If you do have some binoculars, that wouldn't hurt. The moon is the same brightness as a normal daylight seen on Earth, so it's equally safe to look at, and the camera exposures are just the same as a normal daylight picture on Earth. So if you want the moon to look a little bigger and binoculars, you can, but otherwise just look up. And there's a little haze here where we are in California, in Southern California, but we're able to see everything clearly through the haze, and it's actually clearing up. More stars are becoming visible above. And you can just see that we've been watching for half an hour now, and the moon started getting dark on the bottom, and gradually the bottom half got darker and darker, and now it's more than halfway covered.
Now, what if someone has something more than simple binoculars, as you just mentioned? For instance, your little friend there, she has a telescope. Tell us about what she's got, and is that typical of something that somebody would use as a beginner, or is it a more professional situation she's got?
No, she has a very small telescope, very basic telescope, and her father set it up just to the moon just about filled the field of view with a wide-angle eyepiece, a 20-millimeter eyepiece on this little bitty telescope that's about a foot long, and if you just look in, you can just see that some of the moon is dark. But Lily did ask me, why is it on the top? And I started to explain that, well, the telescope inverts the image, puts bottom up and up and up down, and that I'd explain the optics to her later. But that's the view anyway. So it's quite visible to the eye, and it's visible in the telescope. And then we're just taking some pictures with 400-millimeter lens on my Nikon every few minutes, and you can just see the progression of the shadow.
So when you look through a telescope during a lunar eclipse, and you're looking at the shadow up close, can you actually see the shadow moving across the disk through a telescope as well?
I don't know what you mean by moving. While I'm watching, I don't actually notice it moving, but if you look 2 minutes or 5 minutes later, it's actually moved a little bit, and that's yeah. So and that's the kind of thing, even without an eclipse, with the phases of the moon that Galileo saw in 1609, he realized that there were mountains on the moon by the fact that the shadows and bright peaks changed over time.
You're an astronomer and a sky watcher. You've done this for a while. Does it ever get boring, or is every lunar eclipse just as exciting as the one you saw before?
Oh, the latest one is always the best one. Of course, a lunar eclipse doesn't compare to a solar eclipse, which happens in the daytime, and then it really gets dark, a million times darker. So the lunar eclipse it's already at night. The moon can be bright enough to cast a shadow, but it is nighttime, clearly. But but it is fun, and we see the moon gradually getting covered. And one of my colleagues, Marcos Peñalosa Murillo, is back at Williams College, where I think it's just snowing, and it's supposed to be -4 degrees tonight. So I don't think he's having much luck. But we've been trying to get some observations from him all over, because he is an atmospheric physicist for the Earth's atmosphere. And as you know, and many of the people listening know, the moon will turn a little faintly reddish in about half an hour as all the direct sunlight goes away, and only a little bit of sunlight that leaks around the edge of the moon that leaks around the edge of the Earth will get to the moon. So, and we certainly don't call it a blood moon. That's a crazy thing to call it, but the newspapers started calling it that for some reason. But so the moon will be a little faintly reddish, so it'll be many, many times fainter than the bright side. And that's just because of this little leakage of a bending of light around the Earth. But under the sides of the Earth, the light is scattering around, and blue scatters better than red, so the blue will make blue skies for the people over there, and only a little bit of red gets through. So when the white goes away, well, even before all the white goes away, on the dark side, on the dark part, you'll see it a little reddish, and then when all the bright goes away, you'll see it more obviously. Now, that's the total part of the eclipse. So we're looking forward to the total eclipse then.
It's a little later here than it is where you are in California, but I'm just wondering if your little companion is going to be staying up and watching the entire eclipse, even though it's technically a school night, tomorrow being Monday.
It's not for me.
It's Martin Luther King Day tomorrow, so there is school tomorrow.
You've got a holiday.
It's a good night.
So
it's a good night.
Bonus.
And they're loving it.
And they're loving it. Well, Jay, I thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us and share some of what you're doing and your family's doing to take in this lunar eclipse. Thank you, Jay.
Good luck, and I hope everybody can get some glimpse anyway in clear skies.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Jay. And of course, we'll mention that Jay Pasok is the author of the Peterson's Field Guide to Planets and Stars. So that's something worth looking into as well.
Now, we have another guest coming up in just a matter of moments, but I understand we're going to take just a bit of a break to let you know who we are. So here we go. Now, you know, Andrew, most of us, we just spend a lot of time sitting here on Earth enjoying things like lunar and solar eclipses. That's so blasé for our next guest, who hopefully will be coming up in just a matter of moments, because we're going to be talking to somebody who got a chance to leave the atmosphere and enjoy what the heavens have to offer from a closer perspective. And I'm talking about someone who actually spent time at a space station. Not very many of us get a chance to do that.
This is a very special, 400 kilometers above our heads, size of a football field. Amazing being able to see that. So this is something I think is going to be very different. Space station, you can actually see the space station from your backyard with your naked eye, flying at 17,000 miles per hour, taking 90 minutes to go around the Earth. And it's amazing to think that there's a crew of astronauts on board this flying laboratory. And the space station's been up there, the International Space Station, since 1998. It's got a full complement of crew, of 6 crew members.
Now, when you mention that we can see it with the naked eye, what does it actually look like with the naked eye?
It looks like a gliding light that doesn't blink. It's not like you know that you're not looking at a jet aircraft, so doesn't have a blinking light. It's a steady light, and it takes about 2 to 4 minutes to cross the sky. You can actually find out how to see the space station. There's many websites that actually create timetables, predictions for wherever you are in the world. One really good one I can recommend is heavens-above.com. You can go there, plop in your postal code, zip code, or your geographical location, and there you go, bingo, it'll generate how to see the International Space Station. But that's us looking at it 400 kilometers above our heads. This is different.
Yes, now somebody who's joining us right now was at, I guess you can say, the ultimate Airbnb when you think about it. Terry W. Virts Jr. is a former NASA astronaut who spent 213 days and 10 hours in space. Hi, Terry. How are you?
Hey, guys. Good. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Excellent.
Now, what's it like up there? I mean, we look at the moon from down here, and we see it with all the light pollution that we are in various parts of the world that we get to see the heavens in. What's it like from your perspective when you're watching it from the space station?
Well, seeing the Earth is an amazing thing, but when you turn your eyes away, if you give your eyes a chance to adjust and you turn all the lights off inside, it's just unbelievable. There's so many stars out there. I mean, there are billions and billions of stars. And I'm no expert, but I know the basics of the constellations and what the main stars are. But when I was in space, I could never even pick out any constellations. I could see planets, and some of that was a little bit interesting, but the stars themselves, there's just so many. It was a little bit overwhelming, but spectacular.
Compared to us on Earth, how big does the moon look from the space station when you're just a little bit closer to it than we are?
You know, it's interesting. We're not that much closer, you know, maybe a few percent, but you don't have the air to refract the moon's light. So it's always exactly the same size. And you don't see it on Earth. A lot of times if you see it near a building or a road or a tree, that gives it some perspective, that it makes it look a lot bigger or smaller. You don't have that. So it's kind of always the exact same from space, which was interesting.
We just put up on screen a second ago a copy, the cover of your book. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, I wrote a book with National Geographic, and what I tried to do was take a space mission and put it in book format. So it's a photography book, but it's also stories. And the stories I wrote myself. There was no ghost author. And it's really what it's like to be in space. Of course, launch and spacewalks. There's a chapter about an emergency that we went through with our Russian colleagues. That's a great story of cooperation. A few of the chapters I named after colors because I got to know the planet by colors, which was surprising to me before I went into space. But I really tried to capture what a space mission is like in book format.
Now, you spend a lot of time on the ground preparing to go into space as an astronaut. No matter how much you prepare for it, how different is it when you're actually up there? What is that experience like? What was it that you weren't prepared for, even though you did prepare on the ground, when you finally got up into space?
Yeah, so the technical things about space flight are challenging and they're diverse. I was the doctor and the scientist and the accountant and the pilot and the spacewalker. You have to do everything. But I think it's that mental aspect that is really the most challenging, and it's hard to prepare for because during launch, there's millions of pounds of high explosives burning. And so you have to be ready to not, to be able to function during that pretty dangerous time. When you see the planet, it can be overwhelming. I mean, it can be very emotional to see such a beautiful thing and not be on it. When you're there for months and months and months, and the alarms are going off a lot, and your mission gets extended by a month, that can be psychologically challenging. So you have to be ready. My attitude was, I'm here in space. I'm going to enjoy it. I'll have the rest of my life back down on Earth. And so I think really enjoyed and was ready to stay for months and months extra if they needed me to. But there's a psychological aspect that is impossible to train for. There's nothing like seeing the planet for the first time. There's just nothing to get you ready for that.
I think one of the pictures we just saw of you was when you were taking a spacewalk. What was that like?
So I was lucky enough to be a fighter pilot, and I'd been a test pilot, and I was a space shuttle pilot. But man, there's nothing like doing a spacewalk. 99% of it is work. I mean, I only had time to take about 10 pictures per spacewalk, and I would have taken thousands if I could have. I felt like I was on the clock. You don't want to waste any time out there. It's dangerous. If you rip your suit, you could die. So you just were busy, face full of metal and tethers and equipment. And then every once in a while I would stop. I had a few seconds and I turned around, and you see the most beautiful thing that you can't imagine unless you've seen it yourself. And I would feel like I was hearing from God, and I'm seeing creation, something that humans weren't meant to see. And then I had to get back to work because I got to plug this cable in, and I have to put some grease on a bolt. So it was this huge juxtaposition between sublime and mundane to an extreme I never imagined. But it's super busy and occasionally awesome. That's pretty much describes.
So you spent 213 days up on the space station, and then you come back home. When you look up at the night sky, or even the daytime sky, how different does it feel to you from the knowledge you have of being up there for 214 days?
You know, I was a little bit worried when I came back, like, okay, I'm back to Earth. Am I going to miss space? Is it going to ruin me mentally or whatever? And I landed. It took 24 hours to fly home. I got in Houston, did my workout because you want to get your body rehabilitated. And my son had turned 16, and he got his license while I was in space. So as soon as I was done with my rehab workout, he said, all right, Dad, let's go look for cars. And he drove. He took me to the local Ford dealer, and we started car shopping. And it was like a light switch had gone on. I was in space, and then somebody flicked the switch, and I'm back on Earth. And I love Earth. It's an awesome planet. It's our only one. There's no plan B. And I enjoy being here. I enjoy being in space. And now that I'm back, I like Earth.
And, you know, I've heard many astronauts say the idea of seeing our entire world underneath you when you're in space, and you see all those continents, and you see those little lights when you go on the dark side. I've seen those amazing views of the dark side and nighttime side, and all the lights go on. It kind of really, I've heard astronauts say it's like we live on such a small little world. Everything is so tiny and insignificant when it comes to comparing it to the universe. Is that right?
My crewmate Samantha Cristoforetti, an Italian lady, I think she said it really well when she said you perceive Earth as a spaceship flying through the universe, and you know, we should be crewmates and not just passengers on it. But from my perspective, Earth is beautiful. I mean, it is the jewel of the universe. The rest of the universe is black and dark and interesting. And I love Juno today at Jupiter brought back some amazing images. I love learning about the solar system and other planets and galaxies. You know, there was just a neutron star that was shooting out this jet. You know, every day we're learning things about the universe. But at the end of the day, Earth's pretty awesome, and we have a great planet. And like I said, there's not really a plan B. We're finding planets around other stars, but they're so far away. It's going to take us a long time, if ever, before we can ever go see if any of them are habitable. And so for the near time, this is it.
Well, Earth's pretty awesome. I think that's
right.
That says it all.
The third rock from the sun. That's the place to be.
Terry, thank you very, very much for being on the program with us.
Hey, good to be with you guys. And it's an awesome eclipse. I was taking pictures and I heard the phone ring, so I had to run in to answer this.
You got good skies there in Houston?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah?
I'm in Houston.
Yeah, and you got good skies for the eclipse?
We have good skies, but we have Montreal weather. It's cold out there right now.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
I don't know.
I think you're right. We have April in Montreal weather right now.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time there training to operate the robotic
Of course.
arms, so.
Of course, in St. Hubert, the Canadian Space Agency, right? The headquarters.
Agence Spatiale Canadienne, oui.
Oh, très impressive, eh? Now, thank you very much, Terry, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. This was great. I'm going to go back to taking pictures now.
You bet.
Take
Clear
care.
skies.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
Terry W. Wirtz Jr., former NASA astronaut who spent 213 days.
That's incredible.
And 10 hours in space.
Don't forget
Can't
the 10
forget
hours.
the 10 hours.
I'm
Where
sure
are we going to next?
Yeah. Oh, we've got, I think this is the Royal Observatory in Greenwich in the UK. Oh my gosh, look, this is their live feed. This is what they're seeing in England, across the pond, as they say,
Yes.
from us here in Canada. And you can see clearly the moon is being gobbled up by Earth's shadow. And look at that. Look, if you look, Peter, look carefully, you can see that the shadow is slightly curved. I wonder why. That, of course, is because the Earth that's Earth's shadow, and Earth is, of course, round, and that's clear evidence we can see of that Earth is casting its own shadow on the disk of the moon, and it's slightly curved. Really impressive. You can see the telescope that they're using in the observatory there in London, England.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, there it goes. It's coming. So totality is on its way. We're about, I'd say, 18 minutes for the start of totality.
Well, before we get there, we're going to be hearing from the president of AWB, Mike Simmons, and I believe he has a guest that he's talking to in a segment that was pre-recorded a little earlier in the evening. So if we can, let's roll that now.
My name is Mike Simmons. I'm the founder and president of Astronomers Without Borders, and I'm here today with Anna Volker, who is the chair of our group for inclusion and diversity and accessibility in astronomy. And she's going to show us some of the things that people can do during the lunar eclipse and at other times that you may not know about. So Anna, welcome for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's go right to some of the tactile toys that you've got there, the moon and so on.
Absolutely, yes. So for any lunar eclipse, we're talking about the moon. And so this is a 3D print of the moon where one can actually feel the various craters and structural components of our moon. This particular model was actually designed with blind and visually impaired users in mind, and it was made at the University of Valencia, a team led by Amelia Ortiz-Gil. So this is just one of many different resources we can make to make astronomy and science in general something that everybody can access. One of my other favorite 3D prints when we're talking about the moon is this lunar footprint. And so this is based on a real photo of Buzz Aldrin's footprint on the moon. And one can actually feel the treads of his boot in the lunar dust.
Fantastic. And there are other things that don't require 3D printing as well. For example, this book on getting a feel for lunar craters, which is designed not only with Braille, but also with tactile images so that people can feel the features of the moon as well as the depth here. It's the depth profile that you can see. But we go beyond the moon and other places as well with this, don't we, Anna?
Absolutely. And that's where I get really excited about the applications of 3D printing, because my background is actually working with 3D printed galaxies. And so this is a galaxy, specifically the Whirlpool galaxy, that I made a 3D print of when working at the Space Telescope Science Institute. They have a 3D printing program there being led by Dr. Carol Christian. And she's seen here.
This is pretty good.
Exactly right. And so these are really interesting tools because they make the structure and morphology of galaxies accessible for blind audiences, but are also something that I think just makes astronomy more engaging and tangible for anyone.
Fantastic. And there are some other types of resources as well. Beyond these tactile images here, we go into the planetarium as well.
That's exactly right. And so, as many know, planetariums are a really great resource for the public to learn about astronomy, but they're not always accessible because they often rely solely on vision. And so another project, also in collaboration with that same University of Valencia, was to create a tactile planetarium show. And so here I have a 3D model that's a semi-dome with the constellations traced out on the top with raised lines and bumps. And this is paired with a full-length planetarium show that guides the audience through this tactile tour of the stars. And so this is a show that I actually worked not only with the international partners, but also here in the United States. We brought this show to Columbus, Ohio, playing at COSI, where we were able to add animations as well as captions to make it accessible for deaf and hard of hearing audiences.
Well, you mentioned deaf and hard of hearing. So what about them in astronomy?
Yes. So when it comes to accessibility, it's so much more than any just one community. There are many different populations that we're trying to make this inclusive for. And one of my favorite projects when it comes to the deaf community is a new initiative to create a dictionary of astronomy signs around the world. And so I've been doing American Sign Language for a little over 4 years now. And one of the main things I've noticed people sometimes don't understand is that sign language is not universal. It's different from place to place. And so when we're talking about the universe, it's really important that we have an understanding of all of the different astronomy signs that are common around the world. And so when we're talking about lunar eclipses, one of my favorites to use, the sign for moon is this, and for eclipse is this. So you can go enjoy your lunar eclipse this upcoming Sunday.
That's fantastic. Now, there are other communities as well. There's a lot more we can't go into at all, but you have some experience with some other communities. I think that's very interesting.
That's true. So I actually got started in accessibility by working with children on the autism spectrum. In fact, my background was in theater outreach. And so here we see an event I organized, again with COSI, which is the Center of Science and Industry, a big science center here in Columbus, where we worked with children with developmental disabilities to create an accessible and inclusive day of science outreach events using both theater, art, and astronomy.
That's fantastic. So, well, we're going to have a lot more coming up in the rest of the Apollo 100 program, all of these different things. If you want to know more about it, it will be available on our website. Anna will have a lot going on there. Anna, you have something coming up in the future as well, I think we should mention, just in case people want to really get into this.
Absolutely. So we do have a big conference coming up being hosted at The Ohio State University that's taking place this June 28th and 29th. It's an entire conference dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion in the world of science. It's called Sci Access, and you can learn more by visiting sciaccess.org.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you very much. And we're going to go back to the studio now, and hopefully people will learn more about this and take part in the future.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
That's right. I think we're going to have Mike on Skype with us if he's there. Let's see if we can get Mike Simmons. That's the Astronomers Without Borders founder and president.
Yeah, you know, when I grew up in the 70s, and when I said AWB back in the 70s, it meant average white band. But this is now a whole different situation. It's astronomers. It's Astronomers Without Borders, and Mike is on the line with us right now. And Mike, I've got to say, you in that prepared piece, we're talking to Anna Volker, and I just love her enthusiasm.
Oh, Anna's fantastic. And by the way, I am an average white man, so it's So Anna is great, but there are a lot of things going on in Astronomers Without Borders. In addition to the astronomy for the visually impaired and many other things, the Apollo 100 program that we're announcing, this is a part of that. We're going to be talking about the 50th anniversary of the landing on the moon by Apollo 11. Coming up, April's devoted to a whole bunch of programs about the moon and other things during Global Astronomy Month. So there's a great deal going on. We also have the solar eclipse coming in South America. You know, we gathered up almost 3 million glasses after the 2017 eclipse in the United States, and we're going through those and sending some of those down to South America, where they'll have another solar eclipse down there for the schools and things like that. So there's a great deal going on.
Now, you mentioned at the start astronomy for the visually impaired, and that caught my ear. Explain that a little bit and how that works.
Yeah, it's people don't always quite understand when I say astronomy for the blind, but you know, as Anna was saying, there are a whole lot of tactile things that people can. Here's the book that I showed during that little pre-recorded piece where you can actually see one of the let's see if I can get this right in front of the camera. Yeah, you can feel the moon here.
Oh, yeah, that's a 3D rendering of a crater, a lunar crater.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And the 3D models that Anna has there. So astronomy is really for everybody, you know, and Terry was talking about seeing the moon, the Earth from space. This is a thing that astronauts always talk about. And, you know, one of the things is you note about the lunar eclipse, you know, everybody wants to see it here. They're going to see it from another place. I'm keeping track of where people are actually seeing it and hoping to get a report so we can share with everybody. But there are a lot of people who have clear skies. But the thing is that the moon is out there 250,000 miles from us, and we're all looking at it, and there it is over my left shoulder there. And so you got a good feed of it there. It's showing the red color already, which is fantastic. The red is dimmer than the white, so you don't see it until it's almost completely covered like this. So it's looking pretty good. But everybody on this side of the Earth is looking up to the moon. They're seeing the same thing. We're all basically looking out different windows on Spaceship Earth from wherever we are. So there are people in Europe. I'm in California. You know, people in Montreal. Okay, they're not seeing it. Oh, there we are. That's a good image of it there.
This is a feed coming to us from Vancouver, British Columbia, by itelescope.net. Dr. Christian Zasse is feeding us this beautiful image. And Mike, I have to say, maybe you can tell us very quickly the impetus of why you created Astronomers Without Borders. I love the motto that we have, one people, one sky. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
You know, it's based on this kind of a thing. I can go outside and look at the moon with people from around the world. And it started with travels to other countries where our governments don't really get along. And as people, we get along fine. We're doing the same thing. We're all doing interest in the sky. It's something that's in every culture all around the world and throughout history. And it's worked really well to connect people. And look at all that. We have people tuning in here looking for a view of the moon. Some of them are running. It's funny because some of them are running out of the house to look at it and then coming back to watch the webcast. So, but some of them are stuck inside. And so it's really based on that. These people from around the world are all tuning in because of the interest in the same thing. So we learn about each other, we share with each other, and it's, you know, we learn about science and so on, thanks to Lindsey and you guys.
And there's one thing here, Mike, I want you maybe to talk about it. I brought in here, maybe we can show the viewers this telescope. This is a very special telescope that we have for people here at AWB that we sell. Maybe you can tell us a little bit, our viewers, a little bit why this is so special.
Okay,
and
so now we're going to have a commercial.
Maybe we can put it on the table if you need
it's one that's worthwhile. So this is thanks to Celestron, the world's largest manufacturer and importer of telescopes. This telescope is prepared for us especially. Oh, show them the telescope. Don't show them me. They want to see the scope. And it's a nice little compact telescope. It's extremely easy to use. It also actually collapses. And they provide it to us at probably less than their actual cost. So it's a very good beginner scope. It's a very easy one to use. And we get almost 50% of all the profits, or well, the payment. You know, it's $200 for this scope. It's really a killer at that price, and we get almost half of that. So it goes a long way. It starts helping us fund the programs we do and getting those telescopes and other things to people around the world to start science classes with astronomy.
You know, Peter, I feel like I'm on the shopping network.
No, I was going to say what Barker's beauties on the Price is Right. Now, I want to know, Mike, one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I think it's an important point to reiterate, especially with the motto that you have at AWB, and that is that it seems to be that when you spend time looking up at the heavens and looking at everything that's out there, we become smaller and we become more one. Don't you agree with that?
Well, yeah, you know, some people talk about astronomy as something that where you understand the vastness of what there is in it, and it makes you feel small. But I don't get that. What I feel is a part of something that's much greater, much more than the daily grind here. I've got a messy desk here I've got to clean up, and, you know, I threw everything off my counter in the background on the floor so I could do the webcast, and I have to deal with that. So, and you know, it just gives you the feeling that we're all part of something that's so much greater, so much more important than all these things here. And a lot of people get, you know, it's good stress relief and everything else, just to really realize where we are and what we're a part of.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Yes, thank you so much for that great report. I think we're going to take a little break now, and then we'll come back. We'll have some really interesting things to learn about.
And tell people to put their reports and pictures into the comments, or not on here, I guess on Facebook or on Twitter. You give them the tag, and I'll be popping those into the timeline.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mike.
Good. Great.
That's Mike Simmons, who is the president of AWB. And what is AWB? Well, there's this little video to remind you of who we are. Or maybe not. We're going to be coming up in just a matter of moments with Lindsey again, but we also have, we have planned the prepackaged AWB video of the moon's red color activity, but
that's right.
Just looking at the Zaze video that we saw, it pretty much covers it all, doesn't it?
Right now. It's happening as we speak. This is what's so cool, is that if you have clear or partly clear skies, the moon is just 3 minutes away from entering officially into totality, meaning that the entire disk of the moon is now going to be covered and it'll be changing color dramatically. But we already saw during Mike's interview that obviously the color is already becoming evident.
And once it reaches the point of totality, how long is it there for? And then that's where it differs greatly from a solar eclipse, right?
Yeah, exactly, it does. We never know, we know how long, we can calculate how long totality will be. And we know that it's going to be well over an hour in this case. Wow. But it's the color that we don't know. We know that it'll be some shade of orange to some shade of red. It's been called, of course, the blood moon. That's a popular moniker now, the blood moon aspect. But we never know exactly that color. And it's really all has to do with how much dust and particulate matter there is on Earth. And I like to, as a journalist, I always like to say that it's romantically, it's all the sunrises and sunsets around the world projected on the moon simultaneously. It's very romantic.
Very romantic. Yes. And before we get to our guest, I just want to mention one person who's been doing yeoman service throughout the course of this program, and that is Zoe Chi.
Oh yes, working miracles
hard in the background, doing great
work.
That's right. Now, can we get to Lindsey? Is Lindsey available right now?
Transition.
Transition. Oh, the video that I mentioned before that we didn't have. We have it now.
Okay, so what do we do? Okay, so we're going to talk to her about the coloration. Okay, let's talk to her about the coloration, the science behind the coloration. A short interview. Okay, we'll make it short. And then we're going to interview, got to get Christian after. Do you want the eclipse primer? We're not having enough video for that.
And we're back. I'm Peter Anthony Holder.
And I'm Andrew Fazekas.
And we're glad that you're here with us to partake in all the splendor that is a lunar eclipse. Now, we're going to be getting to a guest that we had on a little earlier, talking about the moon's red color activity. But as we're getting ready to talk to Lindsey once again, I want to ask you about your upcoming book.
That's right. Yes, I'm very excited about this. This is my second book. My first one was about Star Trek and real astronomy coming together. But this book is something that it's really been very close to me, to my heart, of being able to do something like this. It's a backyard guide to the night sky. That's what it's called. It's being put out by National Geographic Books. It's coming out on March 19th. 2019, so just a couple months away. And it's really a true beginner's guide to astronomy and the night sky. It's a practical guide, something that you can take outside, go out with your kids, family members, or friends, and go and look and learn about the night sky, learn how to navigate the night sky, going from constellation to constellation, learn about what kind of telescopes and binoculars to buy. It's a true beginner, somebody who doesn't know anything about the stars but wants to begin in the hobby, and that's what I really been dreaming about doing for decades, being a popularizer of astronomy. So finally having my own book like that is.
Do we have a picture of the cover of the book that we can show? Hopefully we can get that in a little bit, but while we're waiting for that picture,
yes,
I just want to know, is this the kind of book, because I know this is something you've always been interested in since you were a kid.
That's right.
Is this the kind of book that you wished you had when you were a kid?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's bits and pieces of what I have in the book. I've put together all the different things, and the moon is a big part of it, by the way. This is what's so exciting to me as an astronomy popularizer, is the event that we're seeing today with the moon is a big thing. This is what brings a lot of people into astronomy, the interest in the night sky. The moon is, of course, one of the easiest objects, celestial objects, for everyone to see. And an event like this sparks the imagination of children everywhere. It did for me, looking at a lunar eclipse, looking at the craters close up, and it inspired me to have a lifelong passion of learning about the universe.
There's a picture of your book, Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, National Geographic, written by Andrew Fazekas. Now, Lindsey is on the line with us once again, and she's here to talk about the moon's red color activity. Hi, Lindsey.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, and again, thank you very much for the video you did for us earlier. It was very apropos. Thank you very much for that. But tell us now about the moon's red color activity.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to help share what causes the moon's red color. And just before Andrew finished talking about his book, you could see there it is. The moon is so deep red already. I can't wait to go outside and look at it myself. So should I pull up the video here, or do you have it there?
Oh. Actually, we won't be able to get to the video, but can you explain a little bit about the red color? Because we're just showing the video now from the ZASA feed. Can you tell us what we're seeing and what it means?
Sure. So the red color is caused because as the moon moves into the full darkest part, the umbral part of the Earth's shadow, then most of the sun's light is blocked. But some of it can actually go through the Earth's atmosphere, and then it gets curved around, and some of the light gets scattered. So the blue part of the light that comes, out of the sun's rainbow of colors, the blue part gets scattered by the atmosphere, and then the longer wavelengths of light, the less energetic light, actually can make it through and get onto the moon's surface, and then it gets reflected back to our eyes so that we can see it.
So this is really interesting because this red light is really has to do with Earth, in Earth's atmosphere. It's all about that, and it's neat. Like we were just talking about with Peter before, is the idea that we don't know from eclipse to eclipse what color exactly it's going to be. I mean, we talk about the blood moon, right? So much you hear that in the media, but it doesn't. That color is not always the case. It's sometimes bright orange and other things as well. And how does that? We can't tell, right, from what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, depending on if there have been volcanoes recently or things like that, it can change the amount of red color that is visible to us. Also, just like the sunset, when the sun is higher in the sky, you can see less of a red color, but as the sun appears lower in the sky, the light has to go through more atmosphere, and then the color gets oranger and redder as you go through more of the atmosphere. So the same thing can happen here as well. The more atmosphere that the light goes through before it reaches the moon and then us, the redder it will look.
So does that mean that the moon will look a little different, a little redder, maybe a little lighter, depending upon where on Earth you're seeing it from?
It's possible. I think it would be really great if people could share snapshots with us from all over the world, and then we can really try and compare for ourselves. Another thing you can do actually is make a demonstration at home. So if you want to pour a little bit of milk or cream into some water into a clear drinking glass and shine a flashlight through it, you can actually see how that model of the Earth's atmosphere changes the color of the flashlight, and you can watch it grow yellow and reddish as you add the milk and cream.
That's crazy stuff. Now, I have a question. This is kind of a little bit out on left field, but if I was on the moon now, during the middle of the totality eclipse, and looking back at Earth, what would I see as an astronaut being on the surface of the moon during totality?
Well, you would see the Earth moving in front of the sun. So it would kind of be like a total solar eclipse here on Earth, except if you're on the moon, that's what you would see. Is the Earth moving in front of the sun.
So don't look directly at it, is what you're saying, if you're on the moon.
If you're on the moon, but here on Earth, it's perfectly safe to look with your eyes.
Excellent. Lindsey, thank you very much for being with us once again on the show.
Thank you.
Lindsey Bart, who is the AWB Education Director. Now, we're going to be talking in just a matter of moments with Dr. Christian Zaze. Now, you may have noticed while we were seeing his feed, which comes from iTelescope, that we were also seeing him in the corner. Now, I would assume he's busy talking to a lot of people, so we may have a bit of a delay in getting him on the program right now, because he's a very popular guy this evening, especially considering he's one of the only people around here, at least, you know, we've talked to people in California, some in Chicago. Not everyone has a clear sky to see the lunar eclipse. Certainly we don't here in Montreal, where we're having a snowstorm, but he has clear skies where he is.
That's right. He's one of the lucky few in terms of the feeds out there, live feeds coming for us. So here we go. We see it again. That beautiful totality that the moon is in right now, and the coloration is really evident. And it looks like, do we have Dr. Zaze on air with us? Oh.
Well, we were extremely lucky. I don't know if you've seen my live feed, but it's been incredible. I cannot believe that I'm sitting in Vancouver doing this, you know, so it's a miracle.
Now, you seem very excited about the fact that you have such a clear sky for watching this particular eclipse. So I'm sure this is something you've seen and done on many occasions. How does this one compare to the others you've seen?
I think this is the most exciting. I mean, I've never broadcasted live, and I'm so delighted I can show this to the world. I honestly didn't expect it. I mean, through a complete coincidence, I was supposed to fly to Florida. I never got there. I never got there. My luggage made it. My luggage made it all the way to Orlando, but I was sent back by the airline because of some mistake they've made. And I thought, my goodness, now I'm stranded in Vancouver. I'll have to drive very far. And then the weather changed. An incredible miracle happened. And it is fabulous. It is completely clear. What you see on the screen, I don't know if you can see the live stream that I have, is I'm showing this in real time with a very sensitive camera, and it is remarkable that you can actually see the moon so incredibly red, of course, through the atmosphere. I'm absolutely delighted. I would like to know, how are the others doing?
Yeah. I'm actually curious to find out how the weather is in Florida, where you were supposed to go.
I've actually, you know, that's great. I was supposed to land in Orlando and then go to Fort Myers. But I've heard from the Floridians that they actually have quite a good sky now. I don't know if it is as clear as it is in Vancouver, because it's phenomenal. Yeah. So I think there are quite a few lucky ones. Well, how is it in Montreal anyway? What's the weather like on the East Coast?
Oh, you don't want to know. You don't want to know. We're having a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Of biblical proportions.
It's a whiteout, total whiteout here. That's for sure. But I mean, I've just been told that we were going to have a feed from the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and they've been clouded out.
Right.
So that's not happening there. So, and I think there's hazy conditions at the very least in Los Angeles as well.
Clearly, you're the winner.
iTelescope has it.
So for Vancouver, we hit the jackpot really here with an incredible view, and you know, I'm delighted to share this with the world. What can I say? And I really have such respect for what you're doing, because it's amazing. When I was talking to Andrew and to Zoe about what Astronomers Without Borders are doing, so it's great that you are bringing together the world to see such an incredible, marvelous phenomenon as we're just witnessing it here now. And I'm delighted to share this.
By the way, earlier we heard that it was cloudy at the Griffith Observatory, but apparently it is cleared up. So they have better skies there too, like you do in Vancouver. Although probably not as good as yours.
Well, that's incredible. That's incredible.
And I'm sure, quite frankly, one of the things that helps where you are is the slightly colder temperatures.
Yes, that's true. But we also have the mountains, which are very dangerous, right? So if you go to north, we have the mountains, and that's always the where you get the low clouds from. So I'm actually a little bit more in the south of Vancouver towards the U.S. border. That's Blaine. Not far away from the U.S. border, and that seems to be the optimum place to be because you're not far, you're a bit distant from the mountains, and you just get this clear view. So it's quite remarkable.
Well, we can stare at this moon all night, and thanks to you, we are. But tell us a little bit about iTelescope.
Oh, iTelescope. Well, iTelescope is an organization where you can actually rent telescopes. You can rent telescopes in New Mexico, in California, in Spain, and also Australia. So you rent it by the hour, and you get access to superb equipment. We are very well represented in Australia, of course, because that's where the company is. So it is a not-for-profit company, and if you have a subscription, you can rent big telescopes, and you can make beautiful pictures of nebula and galaxies and whatever the heart desires, and you can also do a lot of science.
That's fantastic. So I'm sure there's a website for this. Can you share that with us?
Yes, it's itelescope.net. That is, it's just iTelescope, like the iPhone, itelescope.net. That's it. Just if you Google that, that's it.
And I've heard from a little bird that you're going off on a really neat little trip coming up soon, a workshop.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going on a wonderful workshop. That is I'm giving 2 astrophotography workshops. That's one of where my heart is, just like Andrew, your heart is very much with Astronomers Without Borders. My heart is, I love being underneath the sky, and I would love to show you live. At the moment, we're looking at this, a total eclipse, and it's much easier to show you the Milky Way. The southern Milky Way is so exciting and so beautiful, and I would actually love to show you that live one day.
That'd be great. Well, we're going to be here. We'd love to partner with you and check out all the wonderful views that you get through all those amazing robotic telescopes. It'd be very cool.
Well, that's an absolute pleasure, and I'd love to show anyone around. So anyone who's interested, just look at itelescope.net. I'm usually the guy who answers all the questions, and I try my best.
Dr. Zase, thank you very much for being on the program with us.
You're very welcome, and good luck, and hi to the world and hi to everyone, and wonderful we can share this event.
And again, thank you for the great visuals that we've been having on the show so far. Thanks to you.
Okay, you're welcome. I have to run out and adjust my alignment just a little bit, get the moon back in. Okay,
take care.
Thank you.
Clear skies.
Okay.
Dr. Christian Zase, who is
Bye.
with iTelescope, and he's the one who's been supplying some of those great pictures that we've been seeing. Now, coming up in just a matter of moments, we're going to be playing an interview that Andrew and I did together with Andrew Fracknoy, who is a retired astronomy professor. Now, do we have that available? Are we ready to roll that? I'm just going to mention that when we had a chance to talk to him, I was asking him a question about the idea of how people around the world seem to be enjoying taking a look at the moon. And the fact that, and I believe this is the Griffith Observatory.
Oh, we've got the Griffith. Look at
The
that.
Griffith Observatory.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Look at that view. Look how beautiful that moon is. You can really see that orange color. Just think about that, Peter, that color is really caused by the sunlight behind the Earth going through the Earth's atmosphere, which is filled with particles, and it's bending the light towards the orange-red part of the spectrum, and it's cast on top of the moon. It's really a fascinating thing to be able to see that effect right before us. This is one of those wow moments in sky watching. It's what geeks like me, wait for, is to see that.
Okay, so if you're going to rate them, because we've seen 2 very, very good depictions of the lunar eclipse, would it be iTelescopes or would it be Griffith? Which one
Well,
which one do you like better?
I like this one in terms of the orange color.
Right.
But I really liked eye telescopes, the shadow, that shadow line that was crawling across the sky, and you could clearly see that curvature of the shadow. But this is in totality. It's really a beautiful sight, and this is what everyone has been waiting for. So really cool.
Now, before we just got that great picture, or those great pictures rather, from Griffith Observatory, I was mentioning the fact that we had talked earlier to Andrew Fracknoy, who is a retired astronomy professor, and when we were talking to him, we were talking about myths when it comes to the moon, and you know, we are all spending this time right now talking about what we're seeing here, and people are going out in droves around the world and taking a look at this and are marveling at what the lunar eclipse has to offer, and that's what it's like nowadays. But there's a certain amount of wonderment in this, but going back in history, that wasn't always the case, and that's the first question I put to the doctor, or the professor I should say, and here is what he had to say. Here's his response to that.
Well, that's right. Before people understood how eclipses worked, there was a regularity to the sky that was reassuring. The cycles of the month, the cycles of day and night, even the cycles of the seasons went on year after year in a regular way. But an eclipse seemed to be a contradiction of the regularity, it seemed to be some kind of threat or danger, a coming of disorder in the ordered universe. And so people were worried about that. And in many ancient cultures, this was perceived as something where you needed to take immediate action. In Icelandic culture, for example, a giant wolf was biting away at the moon, and you needed to frighten that wolf. You needed to scare it away. And in many other cultures, that same theme repeats, that somehow the eclipse of the moon was a dangerous thing, and the responsibility of people on Earth was to make noise, throw spears, shoot arrows, do what you can to frighten away the monster that was eating away at the moon.
It's really interesting. Do you, is there any record of like specific kind of actions that a particular culture did, or is there any record remnants of ancient cultures that had this kind of a fear with this blood moon?
Yes. So I should say that this is not original with me. The great collector of myths about all aspects of astronomy is Dr. Ed Krupp at the Griffith Observatory. So I have his stories to relate to you. But for example, the ancient Mesopotamians thought that 7 monsters were essentially eating away at the moon, and that it was a danger to their king. So their ritual, for example, involved getting a substitute king on the throne when there was an eclipse like this. And the substitute king would be pretending to be the king. The real king would be spirited away just in case those monsters in the sky not only ate the moon, but came down to the earth. And after the eclipse was over and everything was okay, the substitute king was kind of done away with, and the real king came back and sat on the throne. So that was a kind of ritual that was enacted every time that the moon was in eclipse. But as we said, there were many, many cultures, and this is still true in parts of the world where science has not kind of taken over. There were many cultures who felt that the way to deal with an eclipse was to make noise, to have some kind of a ritual ceremony which involved threatening gestures, and to let the power of the sky not overtake them by demonstrating some power down here on Earth.
Not all myths about the moon connect with something bad, correct?
That's right. That's right. The moon is a complicated object in sort of human thinking. There are many objects in the sky that never change, but the moon does. I mean, it's really unusual. You don't see the sun changing its brightness or looking different from night to night. You don't see the stars changing, but the moon does. It goes through a whole cycle of what we call phases, from the tiny crescent moon all the way to the brightly lit up full moon. And so people began to think about what that meant. And one example that really came into people's heads is that there was a cycle to the moon, very much like there was a cycle to the female of the human species, that is the menstrual cycle, and they were even roughly the same length. So that began to associate the moon with fertility. And so much of the sort of the worship of the moon in ancient days had to do with the moon goddess as a fertility goddess. And in ancient Egypt, for example, it was thought that if you had trouble getting pregnant, exposing a woman to moonlight was a way of encouraging pregnancy. And so the moon was considered beneficial in that way. Also, the moon was in just about every ancient culture considered a god or a goddess of some power. We know from ancient history that there were 7 power objects in the sky that were always worshipped because they moved among the stars. If you look at the way the stars come up night after night, the arrangement of the stars, where the constellations are, never changes. But 7 things move among the stars: the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets. And so they were considered by ancient cultures who looked at the sky as the power objects. And we retain that sense of the 7 power objects today because they gave their names to the days of the week. So, for example, in English, what's the day after Sunday? It's Monday, which comes from Moon Day. What's the day before Sunday? It's Saturn Day. Okay, we pronounce it Saturday, but it's Saturn Day. And so we can have these 7 names, and pretty much in many of the modern languages of the days of the week, they come from these power objects in the sky. And the moon was certainly considered one of those power objects.
So in terms of relics and archaeological evidence, in what forms have we actually seen the moon play in what we're finding from these ancient cultures?
Well, it's interesting. Some of the great temples and buildings of the ancient world were dedicated to the moon goddess in that culture. But we find moon pictures everywhere. When we do archaeology, when we take the cultural relics of those cultures that are no longer with us, we see many crescents. The crescent has been throughout history the symbol of the moon. And we have many pictorial depictions of the moon in some of the great temple ruins to show that moon worship was an active part of the religion and the world outlook of ancient cultures.
And finally, Dr. Fracknoy, are there still modern myths observed by some cultures about the moon?
Well, so this is a very interesting thing. One of my specialties is debunking. I'm a skeptic about a lot of sort of pseudoscientific areas, and one of those is the moon madness idea. For many cultures, the moon was associated with danger and with going crazy. In fact, we still have the word in English called lunacy and lunatic, where Luna, the moon, is associated with crazy behavior. And these legends remain in the ideas of vampires. In Harry Potter, for example, there's vampire stories. Professor Lupin is associated with the moon and actually becomes a werewolf as part of the Harry Potter saga. And werewolves in general are associated with the full moon. So that myth has remained to this day. And you get very sober people, judges, nurses, doctors, saying that there's more crazy behavior during the full moon than there is during any other phase of the moon. There are people, for example, who swear that more children are born during the full moon than any other phase of the moon. And nowadays, this is pretty easy to test scientifically. We have birth records. You have to put your birth date and time on your birth certificates. These are now computerized. So we can, for example, ask in any county where birth records are kept, were there in fact more births during the full moon than any other phase of the moon in the last 10 years? And when we analyze the data, the answer is absolutely not. We can look at hospital records, which are computerized, and ask, were there more emergency room admissions because of violent, crazy behavior during a full moon than other phases of the moon in the last so many years? And these analyses have also been done, and it's absolutely not true. We think the reason that the craziness became associated with the full moon is that the full moon is so noticeable. It's there in the sky all night long, from dusk to dawn. It's big when you see it near the horizon. That's called the moon illusion. And so there is still this myth that somehow the full moon is really bad for you. And so we astronomers have our work cut out for us to reassure the population that the moon is no danger to us, and to enjoy the full moon and the eclipses of the moon without fear.
That was a conversation we had with Andrew Fracknoy, who's a retired astronomy professor, talking about some of the myths surrounding the moon. And while we were talking to him, we were showing some video of various feeds of the moon, one from Griffith and also one from Dr. Sasse, Christian Sasse. And
that's right.
Fascinating stuff.
Oh, it's just beautiful seeing it at full effect. We're still in the middle of totality. So the moon is blushing red right now, or orange in color, orangey red. It's actually quite dark, the color, which might indicate that there's a lot of particulate matter in Earth's atmosphere. Here you can see right there, beautiful feed from the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. What a beautiful sight, seeing the entire full moon engulfed in Earth's shadow.
The real moon looks nothing like our moon right here.
That's much nicer.
That's much nicer
much
indeed.
nicer. Maybe I could spray paint our globe.
Now, do we have Mike? Is Mike standing by? Now, joining us on the line once again is Mike Simmons, who is the president of AWB. People have been sending in questions either on YouTube or Facebook, and Mike has been busy answering them. So, Mike, what are some of the questions you're getting?
Well, the main topic of conversation on the comments in the feed right now is the weather in various places, and it's interesting. A lot of people have got cloudy skies, so they're tuning in here, but it's really clearing up in a lot of places, so that's really cool, even here in LA. So I'm able to go out and see it myself here. Now, we got a question from Dustin who asked what determines the intensity of the reddish color, and that's a really good one, because this is something that's kind of hard to grasp. The light really is going through the Earth's atmosphere, and you don't know and you can't predict what it's going to be like from one eclipse to the next, because it depends on the weather in the places that are sort of on the edge. So if you're standing on the moon looking towards the sun, what you see around that atmosphere, that's what determines how much light is going to get through and how much is scattered out. It's the same thing that causes the blue sky during the daytime. Blue gets scattered around, comes from everywhere. The red goes straight through and hits the moon. So it's really weather that determines the intensity and the darkness of the moon. And if it's cloudy everywhere around that area, then the moon gets really dark, practically disappears.
Now, do we know for a fact, in any way, shape, or form, going back several years, that people have been looking at lunar eclipses? You talk about weather. What about environmental pollution? Does that have an effect on how the moon looks to us?
Well, that's a good question, because I don't know the answer to that one. You know, you would think it does. I mean, if you have smoke, like if you have a factory and you put a lot of smoke in the air, that's going to do exactly the same thing. That's really going to take out the blue light and make the light redder or block it out entirely. But I don't know of any studies on something like that. You know, these things don't happen that often. Lunar eclipses actually are more rare than solar eclipses, even though fewer people see total solar eclipses, because you have to be in the right place. But the lunar eclipse, everybody on one side of the moon can see. So they don't happen that often. And so I don't think that's been studied there.
Now, you've been answering the questions. What are some of the other questions you're getting? And also, any idea, can you tell us about the audience that we're receiving?
Oh, right now we've got about 1,000 people who seem to be watching. It was up a little bit earlier. I think some of the people back east are going to bed. It is interesting to see that people in Florida are complaining about the cold because it's 50 degrees there, while people in your neck of the woods up there are saying it's just too cold to go outside because it's minus 30.
Exactly.
Somebody watching from Mobile, Alabama. You know, it's cleared up in a lot of places. It's really good. And we have viewers coming from Colombia, Belize, Trinidad and Tobago, Vancouver, of course, Northern Ontario. These are the places where they can see it, but they're still popping in once in a while to check it out here. I guess especially in Northern Ontario where it's just really cold. But back east, New York is clearing up and people are getting a good view. Jamaica, Venezuela, Minnesota, Texas, there are a lot of people checking it out. So it's gotten better across the U.S. and we have a lot of people from other countries as well. Let's see.
That was an amazing view. Did you see there was a plane that just went
where the
through
moon
one
already
of the,
set? So
in front of the moon. Fascinating shot.
Oh, what have we got there?
Look at that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't that from the UK? Wasn't this similar to what we had earlier? Wasn't this from the UK?
Yeah, this is the Greenwich Observatory.
See,
very good,
attention.
Peter. Very good. I like that. You know your observatories now.
It's frightening sometimes what's contained in this head. It's just frightening. So
and we've got people who say they're joining us from Denmark and some other places here too. So that's
early
cool.
Morning for them in Europe. That's where they're seeing the eclipse right now as they're waking up.
Now you mentioned that some people were asking about the color and how, what's its effects. That's some of the questions you're getting. Generally speaking, what's the most popular question you're getting if it's not that one?
I think the most popular type of comment, it's not really so much questions. People are amazed by what it is that they're seeing. Dustin, who asked that last question, just said, this is a really amazing view. And it's either that or the next one. It says Texas is freezing cold this weekend. So that's really it. London, Argentina, South Carolina, Italy. People are putting in where they're from. I love this because, you know, I like to get everybody around the world involved. But it's really more comments about it's really beautiful. And this eclipse, you know, it gets rated, and there's a Danjon rating, how dark is it and all this, and nobody ever rates it the same way. But this one is really pretty. Pretty is not a scientific rating, by the way.
But it works. It works.
It's a beautiful red color, and it's not particularly dark or light. I think it's kind of a medium right now. So this is, let's see, assisted living facility in Florida. Went outside to view it because they heard about it from us, and that's fantastic. I love that.
That's
so,
great.
Yeah, Wyoming, Toronto.
Oh, everywhere, all over the place. That's great.
Yeah, it really is, you know, it's an interesting thing. It's scientific, but it's a beautiful event. And as gorgeous as these pictures are for those people who are in places where they have clear skies, they should go out and take a look at it themselves. Even if it's really cold, you can go out and just take a quick look at it.
And it's great that it's a marvelous event, as you say, and it's great that it's an event that we can share on a program like this.
Yeah. Here's a question, how often does a blood moon occur? Well, you know, blood moon is an old, kind of comes from superstition. I think somebody covered that earlier, and it's a blood moon when it's a lunar eclipse. Lunar eclipses, I think, are every 3 years or so. So it's not that often, but the blood moon is just kind of a, you know, it's nothing I'd ever heard before. It's just something that got attached to it recently, and it's a good way to hype it.
Mike, thank you very much for being on the program with us. It was a pleasure to have you on once again.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. Thanks for showing us the views there.
It's Mike Simmons, who is the president of AWB now. In just a matter of moments, we're going to be talking to somebody who used to work at NASA, and now he spends a lot of time writing books, and he's got a lot of them, including a new one coming out. We're going to be speaking to Rod Pyle in just a matter of moments.
And speaking of books,
yes.
Peter,
Yes.
you've actually had some great experiences that you've documented talking with famous people, including astronauts, in your book, Great Conversations. Maybe you can tell us about it.
And the book is called Great Conversations, and for the purposes of this program, the subtitle of the book is My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. And the two men on the moon that I talked to were Alan Bean, who was on Apollo 12, and also Harrison Schmitt, who was on Apollo 17, the last mission to the moon. And speaking truth here, Harrison Schmitt is my favorite astronaut.
Why so?
You know, one of the things I enjoyed about talking to Harrison Schmitt was the fact that he was part of the NASA program from a very early time, and he was working in the background and doing some tests and doing a lot of preparation for his eventual flight. But Harrison Schmitt is the only scientist who went to space. He was actually a geologist. And when you consider that, you know, for the, not to take anything away from all the other astronauts who flew before him, not just on Apollo missions, but also on the Mercury missions before that, they were as the term used to be, they were flyboys. They were all pilots.
Right.
And when it comes to Neil Armstrong going to the moon, again, not taking anything away from the fact that he was the first man on the moon, the idea was for him just to get there and to get back, and that was an amazing success. That's what happened. As subsequent trips to the moon continued up until 17, they had to do experiments, they had to do science. And certainly sending a geologist up into space and sending him to the moon was a very important thing. And if we had had the opportunity to continue past Apollo 17, we might have had more scientists and learned more things about the moon. And in an extension, learn more about our own planet because of our exploration to the moon. So that's why I just found him to be a fascinating astronaut.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's amazing to think that it seems like we're entering a new race to the moon now. It's kind of, there's a renewed interest in the moon. Harrison Schmitt, last man to actually walk, that was in December 1972.
It's a long time ago.
His boot print probably still there, and now we're wondering when the next human will actually land on this beautiful moon.
And to show you how long ago it was, I mean, when I spoke to Harrison Schmitt, it was because it was the 30th anniversary of man walking on the moon, him being the last one. And when you think about it, there are only 12 sets of footprints up on the moon.
Isn't that amazing?
And because of no wind, they're probably still there.
Still there. And oh, in fact, let's not forget, let's give a shout out to Buzz Aldrin. He's celebrating his 89th birthday today. Of course, he was on Apollo 11. Neil Armstrong isn't with us anymore, but Buzz is very strong and a big advocate of space exploration, human space exploration, and not just talking about the moon, but the red planet. Very interesting, since the moon is turning red tonight. Of course, going on to Mars is in the future of humanity. So definitely humans, space exploration, the moon is so big in everyone's mind of late. A lot of private missions going, public missions from other countries, new players in the game. So moon is on the mind of a lot of people.
Which is something we should talk to Rod about. Is Rod with us? Do we have him on the line? Rod Pyle has several books out. He's got a lot of books out. Over the years, he's written a ton of books, and I think he has, and we'll ask him when he comes on the program, I think he has 3 that are in reprint this year and 3 new ones that are coming out. I know the new book he has coming out is Space 2.0, How Private Space Flight, a Resurgent NASA, and international partners are creating a new space age. That's a long title, but it's a very important book. Do we have Rod on the line? Is Rod there?
Oh,
hi, Rod.
There you are.
We can see you, but we can't hear you. Are you there?
Can't hear me? Uh-oh.
There we go.
There we go.
Can hear you now.
Here, okay, very good. So you've said my cue, a couple of them actually. Yes, Space 2.0 is the new book. That's number 16, I think.
Wow. I'm just surprised you have enough time to be on the program with us with all the books you write.
Well, let's just say last year was a challenge because I did that, and then I also wrote a book for Jet Propulsion Laboratory at the Center headquarters. But I'm glad that's over. But you mentioned Buzz earlier, and I just want to say, besides happy birthday, Buzz, this is the guy of all the Apollo astronauts, that whole class, and they're all wonderful people, but they all went different directions after the program is over. And Buzz is one of the only ones that really kept flying that flag about space exploration, bettering ourselves, going beyond lunar orbit. Beyond Earth orbit and lunar orbit, and really pushing the Mars agenda. So I gotta, my hat's off to him. It's been an uphill slog, and it's
and even at his advanced age, he's the only one who will be willing to pummel someone who says they're a denier of man going to the moon.
Oh, you're naughty. That was Bart Seibel. But if anybody deserved it, he was the one. Because if you watch that video, he was just hounding the poor guy right to the edge of the grave. Yeah, but that was quite a moment.
So tell us about your new book, Space 2.0.
Space 2.0 is published in association with the National Space Society. I also edit their magazine, Ad Astra. Got a couple of copies right back there. And
save one for me.
What's that?
Save one for me.
Okay, I'll get you on the mailing list. And it's a group. The reason they sponsored the book was their agenda is about space settlement, getting people out there, moving ahead. So for a couple of years, I was pressing this idea of a book about, let's talk about what's happening in the next 20 years, because this is really an amazing time. When I started the book, seems like 20 years ago, it was only 4, we hadn't seen the Falcon Heavy yet. So when I'd give talks to young people or various special interest groups, I'd keep saying, this new space age is almost here. It's going to be amazing. There's going to be opportunities for everybody. And now finally, I feel like I can really say that with some belief and authority, because when the Falcon Heavy flew, that was such a moment. I had to stay home. I couldn't even go to a viewing party because I knew I was going to start sobbing at some point while that thing was flying. So that's what it's about. It's about the private entrepreneurs. It's about new NASA. It's about international space flight. And it's about our next 20 years in space. So I'm really excited for it to be coming out.
Now, back in the days of the space race, it was just basically 2 players. It was the United States and the Soviet Union. But now, NASA seems to be competing not only with the Chinese, but corporations.
Yes, competition's a tricky word, because you ask them, they're not competing with anybody. They're just doing what they can do with their $19 billion per year, which is less than the Air Force gets, even in their open book programs, by the way, not to mention the black programs, but I digress. So, yes, there is kind of a feeling, a popular feeling that we're competing with China. 2 very different kind of programs. China's been sort of moving through their own version of what we and the Soviets did during the space race, even a little slower than we did back in that era. But now, with this landing on the far side of the moon, they've done something nobody's managed to do before, which is put a satellite out by the lunar limb that can actually allow them to talk to this lander around the far side where we don't get any radio coverage because the moon blocks it. So that's a big deal. India's coming ahead very quickly. They managed on their first attempt at a Mars mission to get a successful probe in orbit. And they're going to be flying humans in orbit in about 2 or 3 years in a spacecraft that's not too different looking from the old Gemini, at least the last version I saw, and other national programs. But really, I think, the dynamite vision that we're seeing is what's happening with these private entrepreneurs in the U.S., which is, of course, Elon Musk with SpaceX famously, and more quietly, Jeff Bezos with Amazon, who, it's worth noting, puts $1 billion of his own money into this hobby of his every year. So we're really excited about what he's up to.
Now, for the purposes of this program, since we are talking about the moon, you mentioned, of course, the fact that the Chinese are now on the far side of the moon. What is the situation as far as NASA is concerned when it comes to the lunar surface? Are there plans for man to go back? Are there plans for probes to go back? Is there a reason that NASA wants to go back to the moon?
Yes, and it's a long, beefy conversation, but the short strokes version of it is there's a lot of people within NASA that have been wanting to go back to the moon for a long time. The current plan, when the SLS is flying in a couple of years, the Space Launch System, the big NASA mega rocket, is to launch an orbiting station that will orbit around the moon. It's like a smaller version of ISS and the International Space Station, and it will be a lunar outpost in lunar orbit. The question then becomes, what do you do from that place? There's a lot of talk about operating robots and rovers on the lunar surface from that orbiting station. But what we really want, those of us in the community, the space community, we really want, if they're going to fly that station, is to see it used as a way station for going back and forth to the lunar surface, for finding ways to store fuel depots, both in lunar orbit and Earth orbit, so that we can fuel these rockets cheaper using resources mined from the moon and asteroids and so forth, and really begin to build up this cislunar infrastructure so that you've got almost a regular traffic route between the Earth and the moon and ultimately Mars.
Well, I was about to say, there's also the idea of using the moon as a way station, as a stop to going someplace further.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was at a conference a while ago, and I'm not sure it was for publication, so I won't attribute it, but I did get a senior official off into a corner, and I said, you know, I was listening to that talk you gave early, and you said something about a NASA lander program in 2023 to 2024. He smiled and said, yeah, can't say much more about it. So apparently there is some money going into something. I don't know if this is a partnership with Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin, who's been developing the Blue Moon lunar lander of his own, which is unmanned, or if this is a manned program. So this is something I got to do a little more research on.
And very interesting, I got to ask you, Rod, what are your thoughts on SpaceX's plan for tourism of going on a trip around the moon? They have that Japanese billionaire that they recently signed on, and he'd like to do an artistic mission and get artists involved. What have you heard about that mission there?
Well, as far as I know, it's still moving forward. It's exactly what you say. It was a famous, I think it was a clothing designer and retailer, who decided that he wanted to spend his money to buy out the space in Musk's first BFR, now called the Starship, his big rocket, which is going to go in lunar orbit. So there'll be launches before that in Earth orbit and tests and so forth, but this will be the first lunar, it's not actually going to lunar orbit, I should say, it's a flyby. So it's going to make a single flyby and come back. And the Japanese gentleman will be taking 8 or 10 of his closest friends, which include other musicians and some artists, and I think a poet and a couple of astronauts, or at least one astronaut, because you want to have somebody to fly the thing if the computers decide to take a break. And that's supposed to happen in very few years. And I don't know if you saw it, you probably did. They're getting ready to do hop tests with the small-scale model version of the Starship out in Texas, I think it is, in a few weeks. So, you know, this is a heck of a time for SpaceX. Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing.
And that Starship looks so, you know, anyone who's into science fiction, going back to the 50s and 60s,
yeah,
I mean, it's unbelievable. It looks like something exactly out of some science fiction magazine from you know, a generation ago.
Or a Bugs Bunny cartoon, right?
Yeah, or even, yeah, exactly.
Kids, all the rockets, well, maybe not you, Andrew, but when Peter and I were kids, all the rockets looked like big silver bananas. And I remember in elementary school going to the library because I wanted to learn about space, and I'd heard about this thing called the Apollo program, and they had the one copy of the big golden book of space exploration. And I thought, you guys are such Luddites. Where are your good books? So, yeah, that was frustrating. So, yeah, this is really like a blast of the past. It looks just like Destination Moon. And when asked, he keeps changing the design and the name. So they put these big silver tail fins on it now. So when he was asked about this at the press conference I attended, when he talked about that lunar flyby you mentioned, he said, well, yeah, there's some technical reasons, but it's mostly aesthetic. And I thought, you know, only a billionaire could say something like, NASA said that, Congress would go nuts. But when a billionaire says it, you go, well, okay. And speaking of NASA and billionaires, you know, I think the sweet spot really for the kind of exploration you're talking about, the exploration of the moon, getting people onto the surface, and most importantly, staying there and learning how to use these lunar resources, because there's water and there's metal and there's glass and all kinds of things in that surface that you can use for various programs, including going beyond the moon. The key to that is finding that sweet spot between NASA and the private sector, and probably ultimately some of the international powers, the other nations that are trying to do this. Find out where that sweet spot is so that NASA could do what they do best, which is, I think, advanced engineering and exploration, so that the private sector could do what they do best, which is hopefully inexpensive access to orbit and beyond, and moving lots of cargo at very reasonable discounted prices, and then let the international sector come in where you've got lower labor costs and some fresh young engineering talent and ideas, and now you've really got something that's going to speed this up. And that's part of what the National Space Society has been working on.
If you had the opportunity yourself to go on that trip orbiting around the moon, would you do it?
You know, I'm the guy standing next to you in the elevator that when it takes a little too long for the doors to open after you got in the next floor, I'm starting to sweat and I'm making sure I got my cell phone somewhere. So I sat in a Gemini or in a Mercury capsule once years ago, where you've got that control panel right here and the hatch right on your head. And I thought, how did these guys, there was a mission where they sat in that thing for 2 weeks. 2 weeks without opening the hatches. How can you do that? I don't know. So no, Peter, you get to go by yourself.
No, I'm not going. So I'm not going. Anyway, Rod, pleasure to have you on. I got a quick question I want to ask before we let you go. Again, the new book coming out is Space 2.0, but also you are the editor, as editor-in-chief of Ad Astra magazine. Very quickly, in less than a minute, can you tell us about that magazine?
That magazine is the quarterly of the National Space Society. It's our premier publication, and we try to keep it a combination of news, a little bit of history, but a lot of forward-looking stories about the World Space Program, about settlement, about what's going on with NASA and private industry, and what people are doing to try and get more engaged through groups like the National Space Society. And this is a way for people to join something and be a part of something bigger than themselves about what's going on in the exploration of space and settlement of space. And so that's what we stand for.
Rod, it's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk to you. Thanks for being on the program with us.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
You too. Rod Pyle, who, as I mentioned, has several books out. His new one is Space 2.0, How Private Space Flight, a Resurgent NASA, and international partners are creating a new space age. Long title, but I'm sure it's a great book because all of his books are great. And also the editor-in-chief of Ad Astra magazine.
This is where the future is. I mean, it looks like this is all the action is happening on the moon. I mean, you know, we're watching the moon tonight here, everyone from our earthly, you know, viewpoints. But this is where a lot of, I think, humans' space exploration will be. And, you know, and it really, and this, I have to bring this up now just before we go, is that this all is thanks to all the excitement generated from the Apollo missions in the 1960s. We're celebrating this year that very first landing, the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing. And here, just a little sneak peek for those of you that are watching this webcast, that AWB, Astronomers Without Borders, is planning a year-long celebration. This is to kick off, tonight is kicking off that celebration of the Apollo anniversary. We'll have monthly amazing activities, lots of really cool stuff where everyone all around the world can pitch in and enjoy the celebrations. A lot of really cool stuff. I can't mention anymore because it's in the works, but stay tuned. On our website, we'll be announcing some big stuff in the coming weeks related to celebrating the Apollo 11 landing.
Andrew, it's been a pleasure doing this show with you. Before we go, Andrew Fazekas, I want to mention the name of your book again.
Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, coming out in 2 months on March 19th.
And the book that you did before, the one on Star Trek. Every Trekker's got to have this book.
Star Trek, that's right. I have a Star Trek book on exploring the night sky as well. It connects both the science fiction with fiction, and it's in bookstores everywhere.
And my book is called Great Conversations, My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars, written by me, Peter Anthony Holder. Thanks for being with us on this program. We can get one last shot of the moon before we say goodbye.
Yeah, man.
I'm Peter Anthony Holder. He's Andrew Fazekas. You say the tagline, because it's your tagline.
Clear skies.
Some very special reflectors. Here you can see on the left-hand side the whole reflector, and a little close-up on the right-hand side.
It's not large either. You can see the footprints.
No.
The footprints that are actually still there.
It's actually two different sizes of them up there. The Apollo 15 left a much larger one up there.
Oh, okay.
But,
well, the photoreflective cells here, so this is essentially a wall section that will move that direction.
Yeah, this thing.
their positions. Yep.